Hello everyone. Today we'll talk a bit more about prayer by night. And just like in our previous videos, I hope to keep things very simple and very practical, things that we can actually apply and do so that they help us in this attempt of ours to learn how to keep vigil, how to keep watch and pray during the night. And from the very beginning, in this spirit of being practical, I must tell you something that I dislike telling you, but it is necessary. There is no way that we can skip any of these steps. There is no way in which we can ignore parts of this process. And although I'm aware we may read a book in a week, for instance, something like The Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John of the Ladder, or if you listen to a series of podcasts, or even if you watch these videos, they may come into quick succession one after the other, but that doesn't mean that our life has changed, that we have appropriated the things that we've learned about simply because we've read about them or because we've heard them. It is unavoidable that we need to invest time and patience and all the humility that comes from this need for patience. The painful reality is that prayer feeds from what happens inside ourselves, and any deep, any serious change, any serious transformation within ourselves requires time, and it happens in time, not from 1 month to the other. Once we've acquired the discipline of being able to control our minds and our bodies to the point of being able to wake up and keep ourselves awake, without that taking away all our energy and all our focus, then we can gradually begin to move our focus from ourselves, from our bodily struggle, to a more spiritual struggle by slowly introducing prayer. This is not yet the time for contemplative prayer or silent prayer, the Jesus prayer. They can be introduced slowly in small doses, as long as they are balanced still by active forms of prayer, by physical forms of prayer. But this is not yet the time. What happens now essentially is a change of focus, a change of attention from almost being exclusively focused on ourselves in order to keep ourselves awake, to focusing on a reason for being awake. And that reason is waiting. Whenever in doubt, why am I doing this? Why am I awake? Why am I not resting? Why am I continuing to push myself when I can see that my prayer doesn't go any deeper, when I can see that there are no tears, there is no real repentance in me? Why do I keep doing this? Well, we do this, and this is the time when this should become the foundation of your nighttime prayer. We do this because we are waiting for Christ. This is the basic, the underlying understanding of your prayer now and your prayer at any given moment in your life. We provide this space, we provide this time in order to wait for Christ to reveal himself to us. So as you are awake in the dead of the night, put it in your heart and in your mind that no matter what you do, no matter what prayer you read or what prayer you say or what action you do in order to keep yourself awake, regardless of what you do, you are in fact ultimately simply waiting. You are waiting for Christ. In practical terms, this is also the time when you may slowly and gradually increase the amount of time you keep yourself awake. You can go from 10-15 minutes to half an hour or maybe 45 minutes I would definitely advise against staying awake for more than an hour. This would be the maximum. I personally would advise you to keep yourself awake as a layperson, as someone living in the world that has responsibilities such as a family with children and a spouse and a job, as someone who has to drive places or who is responsible for other people. An hour would be the absolute maximum I would personally recommend. But as you pray, prayer will teach you everything. Prayer will teach you when to pray. If you should pray earlier in the night or later in the night and closer to the morning. If you should pray for 20 minutes or 40 minutes. If you should continue to keep to a more active form of prayer, or if you can switch quicker to a more contemplative kind of prayer. Prayer, if you learn to listen to it, the simple experience, the act of prayer, will teach you how to pray. One more thought about time. Whatever you do, and for how long you pray, whether you pray better earlier in the night or later in the night and closer to the morning, try to allow yourself a chunk of rest, a chunk of sleep. If you sleep, for example, for 6 hours a night or 7 hours a night, don't break those 6 hours at the very middle. In other words, don't sleep for 3 hours, then you wake up, you do your night vigil, and then you sleep for 3 more hours. It's much better if you rest for 40 minutes or an hour, and then you wake up and you pray, and then you have 5 hours of serious rest until you have to wake up and face the new day. Or if you go through 5 hours of rest and then you wake up and you pray and then you just snooze for 40 more minutes, that's much more restful for your body and your mind than if you break your sleep straight at the very middle. Because 2 or 3 hours on both sides are not as restful as one larger chunk of sleep on either side of your nighttime vigil. In this new stage of your prayer, you need to expand the range of the tools that are available to you. On the one hand, you need to expand and refine the tools of prayer itself. And on the other hand, you need to expand and also refine the tools of your active prayer. The things that you do in order to keep yourself awake, and also the things that you do when prayer doesn't flow. And that will happen. It is absolutely natural, and it's part of your growth to encounter nights or weeks or months when prayer doesn't flow easily. But that's not an excuse for you to skip your nighttime vigil. You still have to show up. You still have to offer that time as a sacrifice to Christ and as a place and time when you wait for Him. But because prayer doesn't flow, you need to be able to select from amongst this series of tools that are available to you. And I need to go through a few examples of such tools of prayer and tools of active prayer or tools of waiting in order to just give you an idea of what I mean by that. But only use these as examples that I've learned from my experience. Trust that the Holy Spirit will teach you what to do and how to pray so that you acquire your own personal prayer. For me, for example, there are certain collections of prayer that have proven very useful to me. I, of course, use the usual prayers, midnight prayers, evening prayers, the prayers said during the services of Vespers and the service of Matins. But mostly, I love the Octoihos and the Menaions. And I always have them nearby. This, for instance, is the Octoihos. And this, as well as the Menaion, are collections of prayers, collections of canons dedicated to the saints of the church. The Menaion has one or several canons for each saint that we commemorate in our church calendar. So during the whole year, every day, there will be prayers and canons of prayer for each saint of every single day. In the Octoihos, there are canons to selected saints, such as the powers of heaven, or Saint John the Baptist, the apostles, Saint Nicholas, obviously the Theotokos and Christ and the resurrection and the Holy Cross. And I use them by, you can see I've already marked them, so I always know exactly where I go. I know that the first sign here, for instance, will take me to the Monday service dedicated to the powers of heaven, because my name is Seraphim. And apart from Saint Seraphim of Sarov, I also pray to Seraphim, one of the kinds of the powers of heaven. Then the next sign will take me to Saint Nicholas, to whom I try to pray every single day to read one of his canons. And then, of course, I've got other signs. Where are they? Here. For the prayers for the departed, which are on Saturday, the resurrection, which will be on Sunday, and so on. When there is a big feast approaching, for example, such as the Dormition of the Mother of God, or the Nativity, or any other of the main saints or the main feasts of the Lord, I will use the canon for that particular saint or for that particular feast, and I will read that canon every day for a week or 2 weeks or 40 days before the actual feast. So, for example, before the feast of Saint Nicholas or before the feast of the Nativity of the Lord, 40 days before the actual feast, I will begin to pray and say either an akathist to that particular saint or to that particular feast, or read the canon of the service of Matins for that particular feast. And that allows me to prepare myself for the feast, that allows me to prepare myself to welcome Saint Nicholas and all the saints I love in a better way than if I just show up in church on that day only. But then there are also collections of prayers from the early centuries. There are also the prayers for communion, before communion, which I try to say every night, rather than read all of them the night before I receive communion. I try to split them so that I pray those prayers every single day, whether or not I commune the following day, because that keeps me in a state of being aware that I'm always preparing to receive communion, and I'm also thanking God for having received communion, even if that didn't happen today or this week or even this month. I should forever and always prepare myself to receive communion, because receiving communion is nothing short from receiving Christ himself, which is our judgment. To receive Christ in myself is to face Christ face to face, person to person, and that is the judgment day. And I should be preparing for that day every single day. And I should also be grateful and express that gratitude for having received him, having received his body and his blood, even if that happened last week or last month or last year. So that is also one part of my nighttime prayers. I then, of course, have a series of saints to whom I pray constantly. Saint Seraphim, Saint Nicholas, Saint Isaac the Syrian, Saint Joseph the Betrothed, Saint Xenia, Saint Matrona, Saint Mary of Egypt, Saint George the Great Martyr, Saint Elias the Prophet, Saint Sophrony, Saint Siluan, Saint Paisius, Saint Porphyrius. All of these and many others are the saints who have chosen me and have protected me and helped me on my way at some point or another in these 20 something years of me being in the church. And I try to remember them always, even if it is just making one bow or one prostration and saying thank you, or pray for me, intercede for me, guard me now and in the time of my judgment. Then there are certain moments in life for which I try to always prepare. I try to give thanks to God for having received the sacrament of baptism and of chrismation. I try to express my gratitude for all the times that I've received forgiveness for my sins through the sacrament of repentance and confession. I try to thank God for the fact that I am a monastic and I am a priest. This is something I try not to let go of, and that of course comes with praying to Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Basil and Saint Gregory the theologian, the great hierarchs and the teachers of priesthood. I try to prepare for the time of my death. I try to prepare for the time of me facing Christ at judgment day. I try to pray for everyone, not only myself, those people whom I love, those people who've asked for my prayers, and the people whom I don't even know. And I try to pray on their behalf as well for their moment of death, because we all die, for their moment of judgment, because we shall all go through that dreadful moment. There are all these types of prayer, which I call tools, that are set before me, and many, many others. There are, of course, my own personal philokalias, collections of prayers, which I can always turn to. There are the church's collections of prayers, such as the Psalms, for example. There are readings from the New Testament. There are readings from certain lives of saints from the Old Testament. Saint Moses, the great prophet, Saint Elias, the great prophet, Saint David, the great prophet. All of these are like tools which I have before myself when I begin to pray. And every night feels different and looks different. And in time you will become attuned and you will know which set of tools will serve you best that particular night. And you will know how to switch from one to the other. You will know how to grow from a colder kind of prayer to a light on fire type of prayer. You'll learn which tools serve you better when your heart is slightly asleep or your heart fails you and is not really on fire with love for Christ. You will know what prayers work best. You will know what saints are closer to you and quicker to come to your help. And you will be just like a mechanic or an electrician. You will see the problem in your heart and your soul, and you will know which tools serve you best because you will have already learned your skill. But that's why you can't rush through previous stages, because if you get here and you don't know your skill, you will be like an electrician trying to do something, and instead of using the right tools, you will not know the correct tools and you might get yourself electrocuted, and definitely you will not be able to just get the job done. Apart from these tools, which are tools of prayer, there are also more refined tools also of keeping yourself awake, of keeping your mind busy. And sometimes this is all you can do. Your soul simply doesn't want to start. Your heart is just like a car that died in the middle of the road and just refuses to restart. And you've got this soul that doesn't want to restart. And these very simple choices, you either abandon and you go back to sleep and to your rest. And this is what your body and your passions and the devil want you to do. Or you can revert to that basic underlying understanding of your nighttime vigil as a time of simply waiting for Christ. And in that case, you just need to have something to do while those 40 minutes of your usual prayer will pass by. And there are all sorts of things that you can do. Never, ever, ever abandon the physical acts of prayer we've mentioned in our previous video. Standing up instead of sitting down. Prostrations and bows. But apart from these, there are other slightly more refined things you can do. You may, for example, collect your own prayers. You may make these collections of prayers, your own philocalias. We've spoken about them at large in a previous video. You may just sit down and cut paper and make little drawings, or if you can't draw, just cut from old calendars, icons of the Theotokos or of Christ, which you then glue to these booklets which you make, and then just write these prayers either by hand, or again you cut them from copies from your prayer books, and then you glue them together and you sew them together, and you create these beautiful booklets, your own philocalias, collections of prayers which you can use in times of spiritual emergency. Let me show you a few. I've put these aside to show to you, but these are by far not, the best I've done. Now I'm protecting my work. These, for instance, are two very simple examples. I've simply cut the paper, I've cut cardboard, and then I've also cut the text of the service. This is the canon of the resurrection, which I also try to incorporate in my nighttime prayer as often as I can throughout the year, regardless of where we are during our calendar. And I've simply glued them together. Then I've punctured the paper and I've sewn it together with some wool, and I created this booklet, which then I just keep by my side. It's always readily available and I can use it. Similarly, this one has, I think, yes, the prayers during Vespers. As a priest, I can use them, but also you can use them as lay people as well. There are collections of these prayers available. And on the cover of this little booklet, I've used an icon of the Mother of God, which I found in an old calendar. Instead of burning them or finding other uses for them, I just cut them and I reuse them in these little philocalias. And this one, which I've not finished yet, is a bit more complex. Again, I've cut bits and pieces of paper, and I've created this accordion style booklet in which I've written by hand also the canon of the resurrection. And you can get creative and you can make those beautiful letters at the beginning, and as you write these things, or as you copy them out, or as you paint your little drawings or your letters at the beginning of a prayer, your mind is busy with something, so it is easier for you to fight sleep. But at the same time, your mind is busy with something that allows prayer to reverberate somewhere at the back of your mind, at the back of your heart. While you write a prayer, while you copy a prayer, unavoidably your mind is engaged with that prayer, with an expression, with the word that you are writing at that particular moment. As you write the word Christ, or my Lord, my God, as you write save me, or have mercy on me, that word is imprinted in you. And even if you're not on your knees or collapsed to the floor in prayer, you are still praying. You are still preparing that soil of your heart for the time when the seed of prayer will fall down and will catch root. In other words, you're not going back to sleep and you are not wasting your time. You are doing still the necessary preparation work for deeper, more personal prayer at some future time when God so wills and blesses us to be able to do it. You may also pray. You may pray for your family. You may also pray for your friends. You may pray for the people who go through a particular problem at that moment. You may also pray for categories of people, such as people who fight with a certain disease, people who have found out that day that they have a serious disease or a terminal disease. You may pray for the people around them, their families, their friends, their loved ones, the doctors and the nurses and the priests who struggle to help them. You may pray for the people who are dying at that particular moment or who are facing their death during that day or that night. You may, for instance, I pray for everyone who are sending us their names to pray. And I've got categories of personal people. These, for instance, are all the people who have sent us names to pray for them. And I have them either in church or in my cell, and I pray for them as often as I can. These have been sent to us before Christmas last year, and we still have them, we still pray for them. And at night, blessing these people and just reading their names is one of these more active forms of prayer that helps me get through my waiting time, through my waiting vigil. You may also do things like, for example, these are thank you notes which I write to people who have sent us a donation. I've cut these new pieces of paper and I'm writing a small prayer and a small blessing for everyone who have sent us a donation, and I'm going to send them with a little booklet or something to show my gratitude and my appreciation. And you may think this is weird to do this at night time, but it's not, because as I say that prayer, as I write that blessing, my heart actually blesses these people. So it is a form of prayer, but it is a more active, practical form of prayer that keeps me awake while still keeping me praying for you all. Prayer itself, the experience of prayer itself, will teach you personally, what are your ways of praying in a more contemplative way or praying in a more active sort of way. But in time, you will need to discover and create collections of types of prayer, so that, like any other skillful mechanic, electrician, or prayerful person, you will be able to discern your problem at any given moment, your temptation at any given moment, and then experience will have taught you which tool from each category is more helpful, more useful for you at that given moment. I don't want to finish this recording before I tell you one more thing, because it is very important, and I don't want you to the candles have run out. I don't want you to either fall into pride or into despondency. So please pay attention for just 5 more minutes. Whatever you do, try to be flexible. Try to allow fluctuations in your nighttime prayer. Whatever happens, aim to be consistent. Aim to always wake up at the same time. Aim to always keep yourself awake for the same amount of time. Aim to always go through at least a general content, the same content of your nighttime vigil, such as some prostrations and some prayers, remembering certain saints, and so on. So aim for consistency, particularly in terms of when you wake up and for how long you are awake. But do not grow despondent if you cannot do that all the time. If you need to change that from time to time, do it. Don't become a slave to rules, because these rules are man-made. I mean, we made them, so they have absolutely no value. It is important to try to be consistent with your time when you wake up and for how long you're awake, just because that will make it easier for your body and your brain to function. But no rule is absolute. Allow yourself the freedom, the flexibility to adapt to how you feel every single night. That is very important, because that will prevent you from the main extremes, which are also the main dangers in our entire spiritual life, and therefore also in our nighttime vigil. The first danger and extreme is that you will fail to follow this rule. And because in your mind, if you fail to follow that particular rule, that means you fail to pray, there's a great danger that you'll just abandon everything. And that's called despondency. The other extreme is that you will continue to succeed and you'll have success after success in your nighttime vigil. And that comes with another risk, which is equally damning, the risk of pride. Ideally, you shouldn't attempt this without the advice, the wisdom, and the supervision of your spiritual father. But that is an ideal world in which every one of us has a spiritual father, and that spiritual father is readily available to us. But even this should not worry you too much and should not prohibit you from trying to pray. God knows if we have a spiritual father or if we don't. And God is readily available to help us anywhere we live, whoever we are, however we are. Aim to be consistent, allowing yourself plenty of flexibility. Aim to be consistent. Aim to have a discipline about your prayer. Get yourself before your icons every night. And the experience of prayer, the act of prayer, will teach you how to pray. Prayer itself will teach you what a spiritual father would have taught you in an ideal world. Take comfort, great comfort and courage from this, and keep on going forward. And as you do, pray for the whole world, including this sinful, pitiful monk who tries his best to help you. May God bless all of us beyond our wildest hopes and dreams, dear ones. Amen.